Hey class, welcome back. Today we are talking about the Iran hostage crisis that took place in 1979. It lasted for 444 days. And this is where a group of Iranian students took over the U.S. embassy and took hostages, took about 66 people hostage. And they wound up letting 14 of them or so go for various reasons, but they kept them for 444 days. And it was all because the United States had allowed the Shah of Iran to come to the United States to get treated for cancer. And they did not like Jimmy Carter for doing that because they thought he was a brutal dictator. So that's what we're talking about today, is this hostage crisis that took place in 1979. All right. It occurred when Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy in Iran and took a group of U.S. citizens hostage. And they were hostages for over a year, from November the 4th, 1979 to January 20th, 1981.
What was the Iran hostage crisis? The Iran hostage crisis occurred when Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy in Iran and took a group of U.S. citizens hostage. They held the hostages for over a year, from November the 4th, 1979 to January 20th, 1981.
All right. So for many years, Iran had been ruled by this man right here. He was a king. He was called the Shah of Iran. All right. So the United States supported him. He gave them oil, and he was against communism. And remember, this was during the Cold War, when communism was a big no-no in the United States. So they liked him. But the people of Iran did not like him. They thought he was a brutal dictator. So they didn't like him at all. And they did not like the fact that the United States had befriended him.
Revolution in Iran. For many years, Iran had been ruled by a king called Shah of Iran. The United States supported the Shah because he was against communism and also sold oil to Western nations. However, many people in Iran did not like the Shah. They thought he was a brutal dictator.
All right, so in the 1970s, they started having revolutionaries. They were led by this Muslim leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. All right, they began to protest against the government, and they managed to take control of the government and overthrow the Shah. This is when the Shah ran. The Shah fled from the country.
Revolution continued. In the 1970s, revolutionaries led by the Muslim leader Ayatollah Khomeini began to protest against the government. In 1979, they managed to take control of the government and overthrow the Shah. The Shah fled Iran.
This is Ayatollah right here. This is the man that is led by him. All right, so the Shah at this time, he was sick with cancer. And cancer was not, some cases is not curable. So he wanted to be able to get treatment. So Jimmy Carter said, which was the president of the United States, he decided, okay, I'm going to allow the Shah to come here to get treatment for cancer. And when he did this, and he was protecting the Shah the way they saw it in Iran, it started off this wave of protests against the United States.
Jimmy Carter admits the Shah. The Shah was sick with cancer at the time and needed medical care. President Jimmy Carter decided to allow the Shah to come to the United States to get treatment. This started off a wave of protests against the United States in Iran.
All right. So they were angry at the United States for protecting the Shah because they had allowed him to come into the United States to get treatment for his cancer. So a bunch of Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy in Tehran, Iran, and they took 66 people hostage on November the 4th, 1979.
Takeover of the American embassy. Angry at the United States for protecting the Shah, Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy in Tehran, Iran on November 4th, 1979. They took 66 of the people there hostage.
All right. So 13 of these hostages were let go a short time after that. They were mostly women, African Americans, and there was a 14th man that got sick. All right. So they allowed him to go as well. So there was 52 hostages there after that, and they were held for a total of 444 days. That is well over a year.
The hostages. 13 of the hostages were let go after a short time. They were mostly women and African Americans. 14th man was released later when he got sick. The remaining 52 hostages were held for a total of 444 days.
All right. So while you were hostage, while these people were hostages there, okay, they were scared to death. All right, they lived in fear for their life. All right, they were afraid they were going to be tortured. They were often blindfolded. They were not allowed to talk for months. They were put in solitary confinement, which means they were put by themselves. They had their hands bound or tied behind their backs, and they constantly got threatened with execution or with being killed. So, and one time, these Iranian students that had taken them hostage even performed what was called a mock execution, where they made it look like they were killing somebody, and it was all just to scare them. It was all just to scare the hostages.
The hostages continued. Being a hostage was terrifying. For over a year, the hostages lived in fear of death and torture. They were sometimes blindfolded and marched in front of angry crowds. They often were not allowed to talk for months, placed in solitary confinement, and had their hands bound for days at a time. Their captors constantly threatened them with execution and even performed a mock execution one night to scare them.
All right, so in 1980, President Carter, Jimmy Carter, was president during this time when this first started. He ordered a mission to rescue these hostages. All right, it was called Operation Eagle Claw. The mission did not work though, because the helicopters he sent ran into a sandstorm and it damaged the helicopters, and it caused one of them to fly into a transport plane, and it wound up killing 8 soldiers.
Failed rescue. In April of 1980, President Carter ordered a mission to rescue the hostages. It was called Operation Eagle Claw. The mission failed when a sandstorm damaged the helicopters, causing one helicopter to crash into a transport plane. Sadly, 8 soldiers were killed in the crash.
All right. So they'd been holding these hostages for 444 days, and they started negotiations for the release. The Shah had died of cancer. All right. Jimmy Carter had lost to Ronald Reagan, so he was no longer the president. So they said, all right, we want to start negotiations. And they started negotiations with them, but they did not allow the captors, the hostages, to go free until Ronald Reagan had taken the oath of office. This was as a punishment to Jimmy Carter. So after 444 days, on January 21st, 1981, the hostages were sent home.
The hostages are released. The Iranian militants holding the hostages agreed to start negotiations for their release in the late 1980s. The Shah had died of cancer, and President Carter had lost his re-election bid for president to Ronald Reagan. As a punishment to Carter, the militants waited until just after Reagan had taken the oath of office to release the hostages. After 444 days, on January 21st, 1981, the hostages were sent home.
All right, so the aftermath of this. The Iran hostage crisis has been a long-lasting impact on the United States' relations with Iran. The people that were living then still think about this. They still remember this. The old U.S. Embassy is used as a museum now in Iran and a memorial to their revolution. And they have organized anti-American rallies that take place in the streets around the embassy each year, and they chant things like "Death to America." All right. The U.S., the image of the hostage crisis still impacts how people think of Iran. If you were alive during this time, you probably still think about it the same way.
Aftermath. The Iran hostage crisis had a long-lasting impact on U.S. relations with Iran. In Iran, the old U.S. Embassy is used as a museum and memorial to their revolution. Organized anti-American rallies take place each year in the streets around the embassy, where marchers chant things like "Death to America." In the U.S., the image of the hostage crisis still impacts how many people think of Iran.
All right. Number one, what year were the Americans first taken hostage in Iran? Was it A, 2019, B, 3000, or C, 1979? It was C, 1979.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number two, who was the former Iranian leader that U.S. protected? Was it A, the Shah, B, Khomeini, or C, no one? It was A, Shah, the Shah of Iran.
Ding, ding, ding.
I have gone in
and
put my yes and no sounds in here, but it'll be all right. Number three, who took the Americans hostage? Was it A, the Shah, B, the Khomeini, or C, Iranian students? It was See, Iranian students that took the Americans hostage and took over
Ding,
the
ding,
embassy.
ding. We have a winner.
Number 4, how many people were originally taken hostage? Was it 10, 20, or 66? There were 66 originally
Ding, ding,
taken
ding.
hostage.
We have a
And they wound
winner.
up letting about 14 of them go. One of them was called it sick. Some of them were African Americans. Some of them were not children, women. So they wound up letting some of them go. And number 5, the hostages were released right after what president took office? A, Ronald Reagan, B, Jimmy Carter, or C, JFK? It is A, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, he beat out Jimmy Carter in the election. And as soon as he took his oath is when they released him as a punishment to Jimmy Carter.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
All right, folks, that is all for today. I will see you back next time. You all have a very good day.